Welcome to Progressive Mindset Podcast. My name is Natalie Potts, business development coach and mentor, and each week I'll be bringing you an inspiring personal message to help you unlock creating a living life full of energy, action, impact and happiness. And today I'm welcoming Natalie, an award-winning coach and owner of Power Thoughts. Natalie's going to be sharing her story and inspiring work of how she helps children manage their big emotions. This lady is truly genuine and a kind soul who will challenge you to consider not only how you work to get the best out of the children in your life, whether that's as a parent, an auntie, an uncle, a friend, but also how you can reflect back and draw on your own younger self that has influenced exactly how you are right now. Enjoy. So, Natalie, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm absolutely ecstatic to have you on and hear all about you. So I'm not going to introduce you because everybody does their own introduction better than when they do it themselves. So share with us all about Natalie and the coaching work that you do.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm going to say great name, by the way. I just remembered that we've got the same name. My name is Natalie Costa and I'm the founder of Power Thoughts. And Power Thoughts is a coaching service that I designed to help children tap into the power of their own thought, to help them recognize that they don't have to believe every thought they think or respond to everything they feel, and ultimately giving them the tools to help them manage their mindset so that they're feeling, happier and more confident within themselves. I mean, things that we explore are, what happens in my brain when I feel big feelings? Why do I behave the way that I do? And what can I start to do to help me when things feel uncomfortable? Things like the self-doubts, the negative chatter, that inner critic, that I know we're all so familiar with in the wellness world and talking about that as adults. But actually as kids, we had them as well, but we just didn't know what it was. So helping children to kind of navigate those self-doubts and begin to really challenge the stories they're telling themselves. And another big thing that we also often explore is resilience. So how can we bounce back from mistakes? Because what I found working as a teacher is so many children were afraid of making mistakes, afraid of getting things wrong, would almost attach their sense of self-worth to the external results. And I've been guilty of this as well. And beginning just to reframe that and see that actually when I make a mistake, when things don't go as planned, if things feel hard, that doesn't mean I'm not good enough. That actually just means I'm learning a new skill and my brain is growing. And ultimately, selfishly, I designed Power Thoughts for the little Natalie because I grew up as a very anxious little girl. I was worried a lot, definitely had a lot of negative thoughts in my mind. And it took me a long time. Well into my late 20s, even now in my 30s, I'm still relearning new ways of thinking and acting and responding that I know would have been so much more powerful if I had some of that insight when I was younger.
That's so eloquently put and articulate. It's spot on, and it's just you've reframed, like the words reframing and limiting beliefs, self-doubts, all of the coaching principles and what we do and the techniques we use and everything. And it's great to see that you're doing that with children. I think when I reflect back on the last year for us around exactly like you said and look at the children in my life, I've got my beautiful niece and I've got my best friend's little ones, and I was even having a conversation with my friend's little girl yesterday around how you're feeling and what they say to you now when you talk to a child like and talk to them like an adult. I know they're children, but talk to them in a mature way, they respond so much better. And what she was saying, I was like, wow, I never used to think that as a kid. I didn't see that way, and I used to see winning was fun, not I win or I lose. Yeah. And it's like that, and the way I put it, where I lost. And how they're feeling, and also bringing that in line with the mental health work that I do around with shout and everything, that some of the things that those people say when they rock up and they say they're 16, and I think, wow, again, I never went through that. And I think that that's what's opened my eyes to see the power, ironically, the power in what you do is key. And I really don't think that people are tapping into that enough or wanting to explore that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with school, so when I started Power Thoughts, and I was talking to you just before we recorded, September coming, it will be 4 years that I've been in business full time. But prior to that, I started doing Power Thoughts kind of on the side or experimenting, because I was still teaching. I was a primary school teacher for 12 years. I was teaching at a school in London. And I always knew that there was something else I wanted to do, and I qualified already as a coach. And initially, my idea was to coach women making career changes. But that somehow just didn't gel. It just didn't. It's just like the puzzle pieces just didn't really want to fit. And I was quite lucky in the role that I had at the school. My head teacher kind of knew I was on my way out. She was like, and so she knew I was exploring alternative roles and different things that I wanted to do, because I found that teaching just wasn't it for me. So I had the role for 2 years actually, where I was kind of like the internal substitute teacher. So for years I was teaching I was a year one teacher, early years professional. And then for my final 2.5 years there, I actually was quite lucky to have a full-time job, but I would just substitute all the other classes when teachers had their relief time. So it gave me an expanse of like basically working across the whole school from nursery to year 6. And that really is when Power Thoughts was born, because I realized then, especially the older children, definitely the younger ones, but when I spent a lot of time with the older ones, and the year 6s were getting ready for their SATs exams, and 11 plus, and going to secondary school, you've got to get into the right school, and rightly so, certain schools open up opportunities, and those sort of things. But I remember one girl saying to me, "Miss, I'm so stressed for my SATs. I'm never going to be successful in my life if I don't do well in these." And I was like, "My gosh, you're like 10. You are like, who even asks for your SATs exam results? I mean, we don't, it's just," but I understood in her world, it was a very real thing, and it was a very big thing. And that's when I started to dive deep. And I think I'd actually come off a stress coaching day with the Coaching Academy. And I actually thought, you know what, I'm going to scrap this lesson I was supposed to teach them, and I'm just going to kind of wing it, because I loved what I learned yesterday on Sunday, and it was Monday the next day. I'm just going to teach them a bit about what I learned about your brain, and just about what stress does to the brain, because I found that really fascinating. And obviously, I guess my gift as a teacher is I could break things down. And by the end of the session, some of the kids were like, "Wow, is that really what happens?" And then I remember still walking home later that week, and one of the mums passed me and she said, "Whatever you've done with Harvey, can you please carry on? Because it's almost like there's just been a switch in him." And that to me was like, am I onto something here, that I could teach the kids some of the principles and the tools that I was as a coach, what you're qualified in as a coach. So whilst you might not always be able to have that structured, pure coaching conversation with a 5 or 6 year old, there are some questions you can ask, but can I teach some of the principles? I suppose, and just, kind of incorporating mental wealth and, mindfulness and those sorts of things. And sorry, I've kind of digressed, but around that time, the word mindfulness was really making its name known on the scene. And I know it's been in the corporate sector, but it's almost like mindfulness was the new buzzword around then. And I can only speak for the school that I was in. And actually, no, there were a few schools that just would not be open to that idea. It took quite a long time to break that barrier. And I think slowly now, schools and the education system, definitely with the recent year, past year, the importance of mental health, the importance of mental well-being, what can we do to support the mental health of our children? But again, it's taken so long. I think we're still, we're making progress, but it is so crucially important, I think, to teach this now when kids are young, when we can still help them form behavior patterns and mindset and those sorts of things, versus maybe to, when I was a child.
Yeah, I was reading something the other week that said about that. I don't believe it's compulsory yet to have wellbeing in education, but it's certainly that it's a should have, and a difference it does make. And it'll be, like you say, interesting to see how that starts to evolve and change. And businesses, for me, it's you can't afford not to do it.
Yeah,
absolutely. As an attitude and how you embrace that, and it is hard, but that's the only way we're going to break down the stigma that's still attached to mental health and well-being. And it's great that we have tools out there of how to deal with stress, how to do X, Y, and Z, but often, especially as adults, we know that part. There's a in between for me that we need to tap into, and I think that's actually more around amplifying review into our limiting beliefs, our habits, and having to rewire again that kind of the mindfulness, but the neuroscience side of things. And I've done a bit of research recently of CPD work, but that's the crucial part. And it's I think this is where it's phenomenal what you're doing, because we get to adults and you know, I've had therapy the last 2 years on and off, and at first I was a bit like, oh, I wouldn't tell anybody I'm doing that, and now it's like I do get it out there because it's been really useful.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but there is moments in my life. I think January I hit a point and I was like, that Christmas was okay, but it was a struggle at points, and I was just literally like, I just need to talk to somebody that gets me. And I was like, who? And I remembered I'd had RTT, which is rapid transformational therapy, peer, her work. I'd had that a year before with somebody, so I just went back to that person again, did another session. And what's so interesting is that she takes you back to, like you said, little Natalie. Same for me, little Natalie. She was saying, who's Natalie when you were 7? And you're sitting there because you're in a state of hypnosis. And I always say it's like the Sixth Sense a bit, where you're standing there and you can see your body, but you don't open your eyes. You're just in this complete lull. It's weird. And you're sitting there thinking, nothing's going to come to mind. I don't know what she's talking about. I'm not going to think something. And then suddenly this thought and this memory just comes to mind. And I remember sharing with her about a time. I said, I remember being at school and the teacher had a go at me. She shouted at me because I wanted to go to the toilet. And I just went like that. I just clammed up, and I felt it as I was talking to her. I was like, and she goes, what are you feeling? And I was like, well, my hands are kind of twitching, my toes going. I said, I feel tense. And it was really, really interesting. And you kind of work off of that on a therapy perspective. Obviously, we know coaching is forward facing, but it's interesting to see this part that if we don't start to embrace and understand how we tick as adults, and that actually goes back so much to children, and when we created those habits, then, you know, it's tough for us. We've got to explore it. And I think I'd rather do it, if I have children in the future, I'd rather do it with early. And my niece, I bought your book, didn't I, over Christmas for her?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And the shares in it are amazing, you know, like self-belief. And I never had any of that at school, ever. And I think I look back and think how powerful that is now. And I'm also reading the Steve Peters book, The Silent Guides, at the moment, which is the one looking at, again, like how you can talk to children and work with them. And it was sharing this week in there about the way that children kind of respond to things, and this win-lose thing as well, and how you deal with a consequence versus a punishment, the difference that can take for a child. Now, obviously, coaching, I guess we don't get into the depths of that, but we would, in terms of knowing the program to build, surely, and things. And I just think all of this comes down to the fact that we need to understand how to work with kids better, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you've said there, you know, helping children have some of these tools, because I always say to parents, whenever I work with families, you know, these are tools, because I do say, you know, I predominantly work with children. Like, my main focus of the session is with children in sessions and fun-based activities where they learn these concepts, but then it's also about educating the parents about what we covered in that session. And I forgot, I had a good point to share with you, and I forgot what it was, but you know, I think, like, that's it. I always say to parents, you know, these are tools that I'm providing. I'm showing you, you know, like teaching you new tools, helping your child understand. But it's very much about beginning to plant the seed to then develop these as new habits. And I think if we're able to form these new habits from a younger age within children, supporting that, you know, within children, that's just going to lead to a different outcome when they're adults, because they've got that different sense of perspective. And an example of that is when one of my first private clients I had was a little boy who, now I don't generally work with children who are 4.5. He was late 4, just about to turn 5. Normally I start with children who are late 5, turning 6. But there are sometimes children that are just, you know, very emotionally aware and engaged. And this is when I still did in-person work. So I worked with him then, which was a good 3.5 years ago. And one of the concepts that he really struggled with, he'd always have a meltdown when he did a drawing, and the drawing didn't look the way that he wanted it to look. And he'd get really upset and be like traumatic, in inverted commas, for the whole family for a good few hours, you know, because he'd get really upset and big meltdowns. So one of the things that we explored was actually, well, what happens in your brain when you can't do your drawing, when your drawing goes wrong and you've made a mistake? And we started to look at neuroplasticity, but looking at using Play-Doh to demonstrate how we're stretching our brain, making Ned the neuron from pipe cleaners to prove that actually when we're making a mistake, we're actually growing more friends for your friend Ned. You know, Ned's a little brain cell in your brain, and he makes more friends when you make mistakes. And that slowly started to help him shift perspective, so that when mistake was there, obviously it doesn't feel good to make a mistake, but he was then able to say, actually, I'm making more friends for Ned. And I mean, I remember getting emails from mums saying they went rock climbing a few months later and he couldn't get to the top, but he said, oh, it's okay, mum, I've just made some more friends for Ned. And that was a game changer. Whereas now, I mean, I did a school session for them in their school last year, just before the pandemic hit. And I remember mum still said, you know, he's won an award for his drawings, and this never would have been like how he's embraced making mistakes. He still talks about Ned the neuron. He still talks about how his brain gets stronger. So that's become ingrained in him. You know, obviously I'm not saying, of course, you're still going to have big feelings if you make a mistake. I still do. And I know that failure is sometimes my best friend. But I mean, I was on the floor crying a few months ago when things didn't go out the way that I wanted them to. But that's my point. It's the power of helping children learn that versus he's in his 20s and 30s and it's a can't make mistake, massive perfectionist, burnt out, overworking because I've got to prove, you know, the mistakes and the good results equals that I'm good enough. And actually it's like, no, we've got to reframe that. But alongside that, as I say to parents, you are learning alongside with your children, because as we've said, majority of us weren't taught or modeled this when we were growing up. So it's by no fault of anybody. Our parents did the best they could, but it was different generations, mental health, feeling failure, feeling those vulnerable, expressing those vulnerable feelings. You were just told to kind of get on with it and not express it. I'm not saying in all cases, but that kind of is, I mean, I've worked with thousands of families. That's kind of what comes through, and I, you know, my own experience as well. So it's very much as parents learning to remodel and rewire your own brain and your own way of thinking and doing and acting and behaving and responding, as well as helping your child.
Yeah.
You know, I think that that's really powerful as well. You know, and our parents know it's okay because I don't have all the answers, because there, as I say to parents, there is no manual that says on page 107, this is what you should tell your child when they have a meltdown because their zipper's not being done upright. You know, every child is different, and you've also got to appreciate you've got your own stories that you've held on to for so long. And there's probably a lot of unhelpful stories that have kept you back as an adult. I mean, just yesterday I did a workshop for a company, and just before we started, one of the mums said, she's like, sometimes I just don't even feel old enough to like look after my kids. She's like, I've got to be responsible and feed them and clothe them. Well, you know, she was joking, obviously, but we've got to, just because you're a parent doesn't mean you're instantly the expert now and you've got all of the tools. You know, you're still trying to figure things out.
Yeah, I guess that's really interesting, isn't it, to understand, like you said, about the parents' part and how they're also feeling it as well. How does that evolve in terms of how you work with people? So you're working predominantly with the children, but we don't like to assume as coaches, but you must make the point of thinking, actually, maybe the parent needs more coaching in this than the child at the moment, because it must be so frustrating at points maybe to put so much effort and attention to and energy into working with a child, and then maybe look at the parent and think, is this going to be sustained if you're then coming at them from how you are?
Yeah, well, I mean, so whenever I work with families, I always do obviously a discovery call or whatever we call them before, to see, are we the right fit? Because also as a coach, there can be an overlap of, are you a therapist? Are you a counselor? No, I'm not. It's really important, you know, and also, I was having conversations with parents yesterday. I'm not a parenting expert, so don't come to me for, I suppose, the discipline strategies or the boundaries. Of course, I've got wealth of experience as a teacher, but my zone, you know, there are amazing parenting experts that can help with parenting styles. So how I approach it is, when I say to families, look, this is a very much a family orientated process. Yes, I'm here to kind of teach your child the tools and the insights and the understanding in a way that they can understand and grasp and get. And we have a lot of fun doing it. But it's also then about me, because after every session with the child, I'll do a feedback session with parents where we then go through what are the tools that we've used, what is the language, what can you do? And together as a family over the next 2 weeks, you're going to be modeling this as much as them doing it. So when you start to feel your big feelings, ask them, what did Natalie tell you? Remind me, what did Natalie teach us? You know, even if you remember it, get them to teach you. You model using it, you showing, you know, when we even if we have conversations at the end of the day, you know, right, so who's made, you know, I talk about the magic moments within your mistake. So that can be a conversation starter around the dinner table. What was your magic moment today? What was daddy's magic moment? What was mummy's magic moment? And giving them tools and tips to begin to kind of nourish these new habits, you know. And I mean, to be honest, I mean, the parents that I think that's obviously the whole onboarding process, like this is what it is. And I say, you know, the work starts when you leave the session, because you're going to have the big moments and the mistakes and the, you know, the emotional triggers and things like that. And you want to resort, you know, obviously you want to resort to the habitual way of thinking, acting and behaving, but actually now you've got the tools that you now need to start to apply and use. So I think, yeah, it's very much making clear, you know, and even, you know, it's, you're on board of this as much as me. It's not a babysitting, which is why I don't really like doing after school. You know, I love after school clubs, but it's not an after, it's not a baby, you know, it's not a service to take to catch up some time. Like people that are there really need to want to be there for it to work. And I mean, most of the time when I work with children, younger children, they want to be there, or, you know, they might be a bit apprehensive at first, but then we have a lot of fun. Whereas whenever I get approached to work with teens or, you know, young people from say 11 and up, I'm always as well say to parents, look, they need to want to be coming to see me. You know, it's not therapy, it's not counseling. We're going to do a lot of fun stuff. I can't work with your child if they don't want to be there. Because, you know, in coaching, I mean, I did that once and it was the worst painful experience of my life. And I was like, I am never doing this. You know, I had 2 teenagers stare at me like, what are you doing here with me? I was like, oh, never.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I mentor for the academy as well, and coaches coming through like we would have been. And it's really interesting that I guess a couple of questions are always asked is, how do you get your niche? And, you know, how do you often not go into a mentoring mode when you know, in terms of coaching, and how do you say to someone that's great without making them feel that that's the idea they need to take? And I said, but you have to remember, coaching is about self-awareness and empowering people. So for you to say, you know, it's a great idea, you know, it seems like a great idea, or for you to turn around and say, you know, your whole energy shifted there, did you know, what did you notice about that? Or tell me what you're feeling, because did you see that difference? I said, you're not mentoring and telling them, or, you know, shaping their mind that they need to go and take that question, you know, that idea, because it's great. I said, you, in some ways I can see you seeing it, that you're leading, but you also need to empower people, and we empower people through positives. Hence why we tend to say what was great about that first before what could you be better at? Because we are naturally, like you said, our own worst critic, and we naturally default to a negative with everything. So I said, you do have to create this awareness and empowerment still. And I think don't get so hooked up always on the you know, we've got to follow the model of grow and we've got to do this. You have to understand that and do that, absolutely, to get the output and the actions, but feel free to explore things as well and make it natural. And I think that definitely kind of radiates through how you talk with what you do with children, and I think that makes a massive difference as well, having rapport with a child and being personable, and those qualities and the personality, opposed to we're going to do this, this and this.
Totally. And I do think, like you say, you know, it is about, you said there's something, just if we're looking at obviously the grow model, of course that is really essential, but we've got to remember all the other kind of softer bits around that, you know, to kind of get people to open up, or to, you know, and to make it personable to them. And for me, you know, integrity is a big thing. And I mean, I mean, initially my plan after, I mean, I love psychology really. And that was, my plan initially was after my teaching qualification, and I did my honours in psychology, was to come and teach in the UK for a few years and then go back to South Africa and do my master's in educational psychology. But I think whilst I was here, I kind of learned that that's not quite the route I want to go down anymore. And I think basically, you know, it's so important just to know the difference as well when coaching, who you can and who you can't help, because sometimes, definitely as well in the past, the lines can be really blurred.
Yeah.
And I think just being really clear for me, it's also like, you know, and as I said to some parents yesterday, you know, what other support has your child received in the past? Because this is what I can do, and my, you know, my program, my structure will help. But part of me, I have to be honest, part of me wonders there might be something deeper there, and I have to be honest, you know, and then the choice is up to them.
Yes.
What they choose to go for, because, you know, and I'd feel way more comfortable them going off with somebody else if that's the right therapy for them in that point in time, and then come back later on, than me trying to fix it, because you can't fix it.
And for coaches, that actually doesn't help us, because we then get self-doubts because we feel we haven't, you know, and it's not for us to help someone, you know, to get the actions for a person. That's their accountability. But absolutely facilitate them through that process. But it is, if you don't work with the right person, and like yourself, I'm really clear, I work with business coaches, and this is my niche, and this is what I'll help you do. But if you're wanting X, Y, and Z, then I might not be the right coach for you. And I've got, you know, wealth, and that's why I love collaborating with people, because actually I might know someone that's better for you. And I think going back to that personality part, I don't even look at people that do what I do as a niche as competitive, because our characters and our personalities, and like you said, the parts of being authentic and how you show up is very, very different. And we both add value in different ways. And I think you just have to be very transparent on what you do and how you can help someone, and ask that back of people in a relationship.
Yeah, just I mean, maybe we're going away from the education aspect, but the whole comparison thing, I think, is also really big, just in terms of, I think, as a coach, because, or anything, actually, anybody, personal trainer, cooks, whatever, you know. And I mean, and personally as well, like, I've definitely found myself, I'm pretty good at staying in my own lane. I'm pretty good at kind of trying to eliminate the noise. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely times I'm like, oh my goodness, but look at how amazing they're doing, and look at what they're saying, who am I to say this, and blah, blah, blah. But I always come back to that thing of, Nat, you've got Pret, Costa, Nero, independent coffee shops, all on one high street. They're all selling bloody coffee. All making, all doing their thing. And I mean, even yesterday, because just something triggered me off, and I came into my office and I was like, look, there is a book on personal, you've got like thousands of books here on personal development, all actually more or less saying the same thing, but every voice is different. And that's just what you have to remember with yourself as well. Because I think when you do run your, and I mean in any part, but definitely from a business side, you know, when you do run your own business and it's just you as a one-man band, so there is nobody to pep you up unless you've got a coach, or, I mean, and I've had coaches, and I mean, therapy is kind of something that I'm on at the moment. So, you know, but you've still kind of got to show up for yourself, and it's hard sometimes. And for me, that's always been like a thing, like you've said, you know, so competitors, or what you see as competitors, because you've got your own voice, your own brand, your own way of being, and that's going to attract people. And there's more than enough people in this world for you to help. I can't remember what it was, but just an interesting thing maybe to go back and research was Seth Godin once said that it was something with some like minute amount of number, that in order for every person to be wealthy doing their business, it was like a fraction of the number of people that they'd need in order to help to be really successful, like financially successful. I can't remember what the number was now, but I just remember that gave me such a shift of thinking there's more than enough to go around, and one isn't necessarily better than the other. I am going to go back and listen to what I've said here, because I know there are times when I trigger it.
I want to move on to that part, because so we met, actually, we were saying earlier that we feel like we've known each other for years and years, but we only met years ago at the Coaching Academy Awards, where you won for coaching education, I won for CPD. And then, like we said, we've kind of networked and connected since then, which is amazing, and I love that. How do you think coaching education's evolved, and how do people get into it as a niche if they're interested?
Yeah, I definitely think it's grown a lot. I think, like I said, schools are recognizing the importance of it, and coaching and education doesn't just have to be teaching children. There's definitely, and I've, the coaching and education days that I've done, there's been, coaching the wellbeing of staff. I know a friend of mine, Sarah Bramall, does a lot of coaching within teachers, the well-being of senior leadership teachers, and which I think is just as important, because I remember as a teacher, my mental health was, anxiety has always been something that I've had. I was diagnosed with it in my teens. I've had therapy, I've been on medication. I'm not on anything now, but it's something that I know it's there, and I've learned how to manage it and so forth. But as a teacher, I really struggled. So teaching in itself, I think as teachers, staff, is really important. Then you've also got parent coaching, and obviously I focus a lot on the younger children, because that's just, I'm a primary school, used to be a primary school teacher, but you've got secondary, and you've got lots of different little niches that you can go into. And I think that schools, especially through the pandemic, have and before, because I've definitely worked with very forward-thinking schools, are recognizing how important it is to have mental well-being support and coaching and all of these sort of factors engaged, that it's not just the academics that count, and that actually all these other things also need to be put in place. I do feel, maybe not much so now, but definitely beginning they were behind. Definitely, it just felt like it was, okay, we've got all these things going on in corporate. But I also wonder if a part of that was maybe down to budget as well, because the thing that you always hear is there's no budget, there's no budget, there's no budget. But then again, there is budget as well. So I'd say if you are thinking of doing it, don't let that put you off. And I think the second part of your question was how to get started. I mean, you've got to just nurture that warm network that you've got. For me, it was reaching out to head teachers and people in the industry that I knew that were in other sectors. Initially, doing things for free, but then getting testimonials. So that, I think, actually, whilst I was still teaching, I offered to do a staff wellbeing workshop for a group of head teachers. And one of the and the lead of that, I still know her quite well today. So I'm regularly in her school twice a year doing things for her school. But I mean, that goes back to years ago when I wasn't paid, and I wasn't even doing what I wanted to be doing. But I was like, well, I can do this and it will open up things. So I think it is like my friend Lucy Sheridan says, it's following the breadcrumbs. And it's just, okay, well, what feels exciting now? What feels good now? This doesn't have to mean I have to do this for the rest of my life. I mean, when I started Power Thoughts, I was like, right, I've got a 10-week curriculum and I want to be in a school for 10 weeks at a time. And now I look back and I'm like, hell no, thank you very much. There's no way you're going to see me doing that. And I mean, even when I got to my private coaching and doing things online, because I had a client in Australia reach out to me saying, oh, we've come across your work, are you able to help us? And I was like, how do I do this online with an 8-year-old? Well, no, by then he was 7, he was 6.5, 7. But because of that, it then led me to now I only do online private coaching, because it just saves me so much more time. Obviously pandemic, but prior to that I was. So I think you've just kind of got to go follow the breadcrumbs and just go with, okay, I think I'm interested in working with teachers. What could I do? And then that would open up other opportunities,
I think with all coaching, there is a massive part. People always say, how do I get a distinction? How do I get this? I'm like, just enjoy the process and like, honestly, love what you do and just learn and just see what's going great, what could be better, and keep chipping away in those stepping stones. And this stuff, so that you've got to then be, like you say, have integrity and live and breathe that every day, and know that sometimes you're not there yet. And that's cool, but you're not ready to pay that coach whatever an hour. You're here. So what does here look like? What is the 3 things you're focusing on, and the one thing within that as the priority to be sooner rather than later, and just build and enjoy it. And like we said earlier, you look back and think, actually, wow, like look what I have done even the last year that I didn't see coming. And again, that will happen to evolve in the future if you stay consistent at things.
definitely. I think like staying consistent is key. And I mean, for a long time, I worked with a fantastic coach, and probably about 4 years. And one of the things she'd always say is, you know, just be the lighthouse. She's like, you've got to keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up. Even if it feels like nobody's watching, nobody's listening, nobody's picking up. People are watching, people are listening, people are picking up what you have to say. People are having conversations about you. People are talking about what you're doing. People are recommending you. And I think that that's a really useful thing to think of when things feel overwhelming, or you feel like it's not working. And like you said as well, like enjoying, and it's so hard because I mean, whenever I teach kids about the brain and mistakes and those sort of things, I think, oh gosh, yeah, Nat, remember this again. Whenever we get into failures and famous failures, I'm like, yes. And I mean, I've watched the same clips thousands of times, you know, in my school workshops when I deliver it to children. And there's always these things that speak to me, because I think, you know, like with the distinction thing, for so long, it's like, well, I've got to get the distinction because that means I'm really, really good. But then we actually, I think there's a lot more to be said about learning to apply and trusting your intuition and kind of molding it versus it's got to be in this structure. And I appreciate, you know, of course, you've got like a certain criteria that you have to pass. But again, like that girl that said, I'm never going to be successful in life if I don't pass my SATs. Nothing's going to be saying you're not going to be a successful coach if you don't get a distinction. Pass, but make this your own, you know, and it gives you a structure and a guide, and that's what you're paying for, and that's what you've invested in. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get. But it's really hard, because I know for myself as well, like I had the same thing back then as well. Like that's typical school mentality of I've got to get distinction, got to get distinction, got to get distinction. And that's all fair and well, of course, by all means, aim to be good, you know, aim to be brilliant, but enjoy it.
And I think you just got to get out there and do it. Experience. I was sharing with someone the other day. I was laughing because I remember I went for a corporate role years ago, and it was for like a high level leadership role, and they said, oh, it was like the apprentice style this whole day. And they said, standing and presenting in front of 3 people, wasn't expecting that. And then they said, you got to do a 90-day plan. And I only know this by walking in, and it was absolutely awful. I was so bad. I was like literally like, I might just ask to leave now. It's that bad, isn't it? It's going that bad. That's how I feel. And I stayed there and did it. And then I walked out and was like, well, never again. And then the recruiter rang me up. She was like, oh, yeah, you didn't get it. And I was like, yeah, I know I didn't get it. It was awful. And then I got really defensive and was like, well, I didn't want it anyway. But then strangely, I had another role came about 3 months later, just popped up and saw it for all. And then they said, you've got to do a 90-day plan. And I was like, oh, here we go again. But I was like, right, get a grip, you know how you work, you've got to go and approach this completely differently. You've got to get out there, you've got to get resources, you've got to go to the people that can show you what to do, that can help you. And I completely changed everything about the way I went about that process of getting ready for an interview. Granted, I knew more about what was needed on this one, but went out there, got the people that were great at it, connected. And then I did, a full plan, was happy-ish with it, delivered it. And then they said, and I got that position. They said, by far the best one, phenomenal. And it was just crazy to think in a short space of 3 months, how much you can grow. But if I didn't have the outset or the mindset of embracing that I failed, I've got to go again and look at what went really bad, what could have gone better, what went really bad, or could be better, and then reshape my views on it. And the perspective, and I wouldn't have got that other job. So you do just have to get out there.
You do have to get out there, and you just have to take action. And the thing is as well, like if I think of all the things I did to kind of lead me to where I am now, I was petrified of public speaking. Like, I mean, I was a teacher for 5 and 6 year olds for a long time, and I could do that. And I remember prior to coaching, I loved fitness. I've always been in the gym and fitness and exercise, so much so that I trained to become a fitness instructor, so exercise to music instructor. But the journey to that was really scary, because I remember being in a spin class, the one Thursday afternoon, the instructor just had so much energy. And you know, like that time, I don't know, maybe some people are rolling their eyes if they don't do exercise, right? No judgment. But like they, you know, I mean, she, like, I just got goosebumps, you know, like that, you know, all the feel good feelings are just going. And I was like, wow, I'd love to be like her, but I can't, because I'm just a teacher. That was my negative chatter. And granted, a teacher does amazing, brilliant stuff. And I don't think I'd be able to run my business had I not been a teacher, because as I say to teacher friends of mine, it really puts you in a good stead to run your own business. But that was my chatter back then, definitely not now. And I remember thinking, but I always had this little seed of, but I really want to teach classes. I don't know why, but I want to be able to give that energy into a room. And so I played it safe, and I first qualified to be a kids fitness instructor. And then I was like, no, this does not hit the boat, because I don't want to teach PE. This is not what I want to do. And then I did the exercise to music qualification. And I remember like being really scared to kind of finally deliver my final assessment to like the big group of people. And then I was like, no, I really want to teach Fight Club. So Fight Club is a drum and bass group choreography exercise class. It's like, you know, it's I love it. And I remember going for auditions at the gym I really wanted to teach at. And well, one of the instructors basically, in a very ineloquent way, just basically said, you're not fun enough or cool enough to be part of the gym. And I was like, right, well, I've been a member around these gyms for a very long time. I think I am. And I remember being absolutely devastated. And then I don't know what had happened, but I had to go back. Management had changed, and there was a new manager that came in. So I redid a new audition. This time it was a spin audition. Yep, no, we want you. You're on the wait, like the cover list. And then I started just to take up different cover jobs whilst I was still teaching full time. So I'd do like classes in the morning or class, because I was trying to see, I wanted to leave teaching for a long time. And I was like, do I become a personal trainer? So that was actually the initial read, was personal training, alongside exercise to music and things like that. And then it ended up, I got my own slots. I mean, my classes were packed out. My classes were full. And I was like, yeah, I probably did need to grow a little bit in that time. And looking back now, you know, and then basically when I was exploring the idea of becoming a personal trainer, coaching was one of the things that came onto my radar. And I then explored that. And then I decided I'd rather go for the coaching qualification, the personal training qualification. But long story short, really, those little things, and I don't teach anymore, but that really gave me the confidence I needed to be able to speak up more for myself, to deliver presentations and talks that I do now, and also to believe in myself, because I honestly did not believe that Thursday night that I could do what I obviously set out to do. You know, and I think like it's those breadcrumb things. Like nowhere in hell, looking back then to now, would I've ever thought I'm doing what I'm doing now. Like, and the idea of even working in education still, I was kicking and screaming, because all I wanted to do was leave. I just wanted to leave, and what can I find that's different? But actually here we are again, you know. And it's really funny. And I mean, because I always used to tell my mum, I just want to teach about what I'm passionate about. And it's really weird that I'm actually kind of doing that now, you know, because mental health was another passion of mine. So I just say, like we said before, like be curious, and like the failures as well, you know. And you've reminded me, because I had a face down moment not too long ago. So I was like, okay, remember, I've got to grow a little bit more.
And I think that's where I say, you know, I've kind of put it out there, but in the minute it's a bit controversial, but everyone says mindset's everything. I'm like, it is, but it's always there. So don't pitch that like you're gonna suddenly go into mindset, you'll do 6 months in it, and woohoo, your mindset's gonna be perfect. Understanding your mindset and how you work, and embracing that, and then getting the best out of yourself, that's where mindset is key for me in everything, because that's completely different. My self-doubt's never going to go. Like fear of failure is never going to go. The mind chatter's always going to be there, but they're going to be there at different volumes, and you know, at different moments, depending on environment or whatever's going on in our life. And I think that understanding ourselves is probably the key for me around the mindset, is key more.
Definitely. And I know what you mean, because it's not about, sometimes I think the mindset stuff, it's like, but just think positive,
It's not.
It's not, because actually somebody who does struggle with anxiety, I get that, but actually that's also a very real thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and my husband and I joke about it, because I've often now, quite openly, I've had some therapy for the last 6 months. And what we've identified are my cyclones, my worry cyclones. And now I'm like, oh, well, there's the cyclone again. I can see. And that's just me catastrophizing.
Yes.
But no amount of positive thinking would ever get me out of that. And I think that's why I got so frustrated, because I was like, the messages you can get is, and I totally understand, like there is a link between thoughts, feelings, behavior, there's all of that. I think it's also making space for some of those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings that you do have. And allowing yourself to sit with some of those feelings.
I agree.
And going at your own pace as well.
You
know, it's a real, it's a game. It's just like, it's more of a dance, should I say. It's not just mindset, right? Let's be positive, because sometimes bad stuff happens. And then you've got to give yourself a bit of a break. And it might not feel very positive. You might not be very positive, but you're sitting with whatever the feeling it is. For me, it's just always a case of, after you've allowed yourself the time to sit with that. So I can sit in my cyclones, and sometimes I'll give them some air time. But then I guess it comes to that point of, okay, well, we've got a choice, because I can feel myself maybe going further down. So what would support me with that? Or it's like, come on now, and I mean, by now I've got a lot of tools. I'm like, okay, come on now, let's get yourself back up again. Let's go slowly, one step at a time.
Love that. So I always kind of round off the podcast with my kind of 5 fire questions. So I'm going to ping them out to you, young lady. So how do you measure success?
Oh, gosh.
Boom.
First thing into my mind was numbers, and I'm like, it's not numbers. No, do you know what? I think we were talking before. I think reflecting back, because I think I can be, and I've definitely like really gotten caught up on like the numbers, and I should achieve this, should achieve that, and like the expectations might be really big. But I think actually taking sort of look how far you've come and the consistent steps. I think for me, success is the consistent small steps.
Amazing.
That's success. Yeah.
And actually, you touched on it right at the start. What would you tell your younger, I usually say your younger self, but your younger little Natalie?
Oh gosh, I just tell her to relax. Just relax, Nat. Relax, calm down. It's all gonna be okay. And don't worry. Like, well, not don't worry. Just catch the cyclones.
I love that. What can people do to live a happier life?
Do you know what? I think get off social media sometimes is a thing too. I think switching off. And the only reason why I say this is because recently I've asked myself that question, because I think definitely during the pandemic, it's we're all online. And actually yesterday, for the first time, I went for a walk and I just put everything off. And I just I had a podcast in, then I was like, actually, no, I'm just going to take that out. And I've not done that for a long time, because I'm always I'm listening to something, or when I rarely, and I want to keep my mind busy. But actually it felt really uncomfortable for the first 10 minutes. But then I was like, and then I all of a sudden felt my watch going off with notifications. I was like, do you know what? I'm enjoying this no time with anyone or anything. And I think for me, that was I think just having some time to switch off. And then maybe giving yourself a bit of space to see what can bring more joy into your life. And I'm only speaking from my own experience, because I've just noticed I'm very much switched on all the time.
And I think, like we said, that drive that you can have has been, like I am too. I noticed for me, my biggest struggle last year was not having a gym. Wasn't just for being looking great and all that jazz. It was like, that's where I work. I can work with a lot of people all the time, or be like this, on and off. That's my me time for me. That's what makes me happy, because I do put my headphones in. I can like a miserable cow, but I'm just, because I'm in my moment, I've got my music on that I want to listen to. I'm really focused on something that I absolutely love. It's probably one of the only things, a bit like boxing, as strange as it sounds, bloody hard, but it's one of the only things where I literally wipe out everything that's happening around me. It's like there's a massive circle that goes around me, and there is nothing within that apart from me in that moment. And I just switch off, and that's why I love it. So I think finding that for yourself in whatever capacity it is, and like you said, sometimes just going for a walk and just listening to the birds, and I love walks for that.
And actually, for me, moving your body, that's been a big thing as well. And that's a big game changer for me. And I notice such a difference if I don't go in the mornings versus when I do move my body.
Moving on from that slightly change though, what can people do to live a more purposeful life?
Oh, I think don't be afraid to follow that little nudge. If you've got a little nudge inside you of curiosity, of like, maybe there's that little voice saying, oh, you know, but you could maybe be really good at this. Because I think sometimes we can silence it out, oh, with all the rational things, and just allow yourself to be curious about those things that you're interested in, that light you up, that don't be afraid, I think, to do more of what you enjoy. And I don't mean like always nights out and binge, you know, I mean, of course that's all got its space, but I think for a long time I tried to silence that voice of, in that space, at least, the exercise and wanting to teach classes. And it doesn't always have to be such a big thing like that, but it could be, oh, that seems quite fun, but then you never really make time for it. So I think looking at what can you, you know, just following that little nudge inside you in terms of, I don't know if we've all had that, but you know, when there's something like your intuition's like, oh, but that could be good, but no, I couldn't really do that, I'm too old, I don't have enough money. Figure out how you could maybe do that, or just be curious about it, I think.
And what do you want to be known for?
I definitely want to be known for, I don't have an eloquent name for it, but definitely in terms of helping children tap into the power of their own thought. I know that sounds really cheesy, but it is just known for helping children when it comes to, you don't have to believe all the stories you're telling yourself. And you can change that.
Yeah, but I love that. It's funny, I was saying to a friend yesterday, because we were talking about, she started a blog for mental health, it's amazing, and she was just like, oh, how do I end it without sounding cheesy? And I was like, just sometimes it might feel a bit like that, just go with it for the minute. Like I always say, have a great day. And I said at the start, it started feeling a bit like, oh, very American, like you're welcome. I said, but actually, I just say it all the time now. And I say, I roll it off on all of my emails and everything. And I just think, actually, that's me. I've made that me. And it feels good now. And it's different to what other people are saying. So I'll run with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I agree. So yeah, that's what I want to be known for.
You touched on the Power Thoughts. Where can people find and connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram a lot, so Power Thoughts NC, so all lowercase. My website as well, powerthoughts.co.uk. You can connect with me on there. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn as well and Facebook. I do have a Facebook group actually, which I started recently for parents. So that's Power Thoughts by Natalie Costa Facebook group. Yeah, very original. Does what it says on the tin.
There we go. Good for you. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you, and I really value and appreciate your time. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
A huge thank you to Natalie, and a huge thank you to Lee for listening to my podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, then I highly recommend you check out the previous episodes, exploring everything from business to relationships, mindset and goal setting. If you are looking to transform and build your coaching business, then I would love you to join my new coaching program, helping business coaches start their coaching business. To find out more, reach out and share your biggest struggle with me right now, and let's see what and how I can help you. As always, go take action, make an impact, and have a great day.